and I shall hand over to you now, Jo.
Okay, super. Can somebody wave at me that you can hear me and see me? Thank you very much. So yes, thank you all for joining us this evening. I am delighted to be able to talk about MERETSEGER, one of my favourite deities, she who loves silence. So we are going to begin by looking really at her association with the natural environment, particularly the Theban landscape. We're then going to move on and contemplate the similarities with Hathor. We'll then consider the worship of MERETSEGER at Deir el-Medina. There is little evidence of the worship of MERETSEGER outside of Thebes. She is very much associated with the Theban landscape. So we'll look at stele, tomb scenes, and ostraca. We will also look at her association with other goddesses, and we'll end contemplating the importance of other serpent deities. We'll look at Merenet, who is found in representations at Deir el-Medina, but in nowhere near the numbers that we see at MERETSEGER. So she is really associated with the peak of the west. We can see this beautiful El-Kern, the Theban mountains, and the name is very evocative of the place. Any of you who have walked in the Theban mountains, it is really noticeable the quietness, and that's even in modernity. As you leave the hustle and bustle of Luxor, you leave the shouting of the taxi, the caliche, the felucca, the helicopter, and you walk up into the mountains, you feel the silence. That's why she is very much one of my favourite deities, because you can almost feel her presence, and that is how I feel that the ancients will have engaged with her, and that's why I think she is such an important goddess to the residents of Deir el-Medina, because she epitomises this landscape. Of course, Hathor is referred to as mistress of the West, the whole Western necropolis, but as I said, we'll talk more about the similarity between the two goddesses later. But if we just have a look at this map of the western bank, we can see El-Kern looms large. So we can think that the workmen of Deir el-Medina, they reside here, and they walk this route to the camp. This is the camp where they spend their working week. In ancient Egypt, the week was 10 days, and you would work in theory for 8 of them. So to save them walking to and from the village to Valley of the Kings every day, they have a small camp there. Obviously, we have to remember you'd have to carry equipment. In the summer months, this would be really quite a drain. So we can see really that this mountain really looms over the workmen in their place of residence, and of course when they are working at the valley. It was in earlier scholarship sometimes believed that MERETSEGER was particularly associated with this region here near the temple of Seti, but really it is likely that she epitomizes this whole mountainside. And another one of her names is who is in front of their master. And we have to remember that El-Kern and Deir el-Bahari are, of course, directly opposite Karnak, which was, of course, the seat of Amun, Mut, and Khonsu, the preeminent deities in New Kingdom Egypt. We can think again about this geographical location. If we just remember that Deir al-Bahari that the temple created by Hatshepsut was really initiated to be really the focus point of the beautiful festival of the valley, where Amen, Mut and Khonsu leave Karnak and travel over to Deir al-Bahari. Amen resides, the bark of Amen resides in the upper terrace of Hatshepsut's temple. And although we think of the beautiful festival as being very much about the triad of Amen, Mut and Khonsu, it is really Hathoric in origin because the Karnak deities reside in the mountainside. The shrine where Amen resides in the upper terrace is cut into the hillside. So we can really think about the importance of the mountainside being associated with female deities. And if we just look at this really rather wonderful image of the western bank, we can see that the rock formation is very suggestive of a serpent. Donahue, in his excellent article about goddesses of the Theban mountain, he suggests that this is serpentine in origin. So it is possible that the mountainside is really seen to epitomize this divine femininity, and we can think that when the bark of Amen resides in the mountain, this is almost like a cave-like womb that has the promise of rebirth. But we can really see that the mountainside is taking the form of this rearing cobra. So we can think that it is looming over the Deir al-Medina residence in a protective capacity, but also perhaps in an omnipresence manner, perhaps monitoring and watching their actions. As I said, we need to contemplate the Hathoric associations. There is, of course, this very famous statue, which was created by Thutmose III for his son Amenhotep II. And this beautiful Hathoric cow, this was placed in the mountainside. We can see this wonderful old excavation photograph here. It was excavated by the Met, and you imagine finding that placed between the temple of Mentuhotep II and Hatshepsut. So again, we can see that this mountainside is really very much associated with these female deities. And we can see Amenhotep II here. He's placed under the protection of Hathor. We've got these beautiful papyrus marshes here, and he is, of course, receiving sustenance here. He is being suckled by the goddess. Kings are suckled during 3 occasions at their birth, their rebirth, and their coronation. And of course, we can see Hathor has this beautiful sun disk and cow horns here. But it's this association with the mountainside that is particularly important. But if we're thinking about the links with MERETSEGER, this wonderful statue again of Amenhotep II, we can see here he is under the protection of the cobra goddess. But it is incredibly similar to the statue that we've just seen, where he is under the protection of Hathor. This is a wonderful object. The cobra, we've got the reared hood, which is as if it's about to strike. So it's clearly in a protective capacity. Both the king and the deity are raised. They're on these plinths, which again is really showing their divinity. This was found in the Karnak cache. This means it was removed from Karnak proper by priests in the Ptolemaic period to make room for more statues. Karnak cache, nearly 800 stone statues were found, in addition to 17,000 bronzes. So this suggests that MERETSEGER is revered to some degree at Karnak, as this statue was placed there. We can see we have again the papyrus umbels, which of course are very much associated with Hathor. But for me, that this statue also, that the way that the serpent goddess is depicted, it is also very evocative of the mountain range and the colossus that we have just seen. So it's very interesting that Amenhotep is depicted under the protection of MERETSEGER and Hathor, and in a very, very similar manner. They've both got the sun disk and the cow horns. I'd just really like us to think about the multifaceted nature of the divine. I think we talked, those of you who joined me last week, we talked a little bit about this in the questions, how we can think of the divine essence of a god, and how it remains constant, but it can be poured into different shaped vessels, so it can take different forms. And we see this in this fantastic late period statue that's in the Louvre. We have the beautiful bovine representation of Hathor, but we also have a serpentine representation here, which could, of course, be depicting the essence of her as MERETSEGER. We have the human form, and then we have a lion-headed female, which may represent Sekhmet. But it's this multifaceted nature of the divine that is important for us while we are considering the nature of MERETSEGER. So if we move on to think about the worship of MERETSEGER at Deir el-Medina, for many years it was believed that this shrine, which is really a ravine that is on the path between Valley of the Kings and the village of the workmen. There are 7 what are often called grottos, which are both natural and man-made. And for many years, scholars believed that it was here that Ptah and MERETSEGER were worshipped. Briere, for example, he believed that many stelae, which were originally placed in the walls, we can see the recesses for them, how these were taken to Turin by Schiaparelli when he excavates the site in 1905 and 1909, and before him Drovetti. Drovetti, of course, and his agents do not excavate, but they acquire objects from the site, shall we say. And many of these objects of Drovetti come into to Turin Museum in 1824. So Turin has this fantastic collection of Deir el-Medina material, but much of it we do not actually know its provenance, because Schiaparelli also did not fully record where he found objects on the site. So sadly, we often don't know for certain where the Deir el-Medina material in Turin originated. So Briere originally believed that this shrine was dedicated to MERETSEGER and Ptah. More recent work trying to look at the objects that Schiaparelli brought have found that he recorded 80 objects, and Briere believed that they came from this shrine, but scholars trying to understand the records now believe that this is not necessarily so, and these objects originally attributed to the shrine actually came from the village. And it's now thought that most of the stelae that originated from this shrine were dedicated to Ptah or Amun-Ra. So it is not necessarily MERETSEGER who is worshipped in this shrine. When she is depicted on stelae that might come from the shrine, she is associated with Hathor. The shrine itself was undecorated until the reign of Ramesses III, but the objects that have been attributed to it suggest it was in use from the reign of Horemheb. So there's about 150 years while the shrine was undecorated. But it is likely that this stele is depicting the shrine. We can see this depression in the mountainside, wonderful stele in Turin. It is fascinating because we do have the 4 rearing cobras, so we can see the association of the mountainside with a serpent deity. MERETSEGER is not named on this stele at all. The deity who is being venerated is Isis. Isis is not particularly commonly attested at Deir el-Medina. We can just make out her name here, and fascinatingly she also has a serpent determinative. Goddesses, several goddesses do use a serpent determinative, not simply goddesses who represent as a serpent. That might be to show that their protective capacity, their nurturing role, their regenerative role, but we can see Isis here is clearly the goddess who is being revered. She's the mother of the gods, and she's the mistress of the sky. But we can't get away from the very strong and direct association of the mountainside with the serpentine goddesses. So if we look at some objects which clearly do show the veneration of MERETSEGER, we see she is depicted either in serpent or human form, or sometimes we have a combination of the two. This beautiful statue was brought into the museum from the Dravetti collection, so we can't say for sure where it was found. It's likely that it would have been placed in a votive chapel. The workmen created small chapels where they worshipped in groups, generally of about 12, and they worshipped a variety of deities, including ancestors, both royal and non-royal. But it's very likely that this statue was venerated in a votive chapel. It is a beautiful creation. We can see the reared hood here, and again we have the coiled body, which to me is very evocative of the mountainside. The human face, I wondered whether the use of a human face made the goddess more approachable, whether it made her more benevolent. This is, of course, a time of great personal piety, where the ancient Egyptians believed that they can have a direct and a close relationship with the gods. And this is represented in hymns and in objects where we see the affinity between the dedicatees and the deities. We can see here it's highly likely that this statue would have had cow horns and a sun disk atop. There is another very similar statue in Turin where MERETSEGER wears a polis headdress. It's likely that there would have been a bowl placed here, so you would make a libation. You would stand in front of the statue. So this concept of the multifaceted nature of the divine, we see wonderfully depicted in this stele, both in the text and in the iconography. It is quite an unusual shape. It might have been created to be placed in the shrine, or it might have been part of a door lintel. It is a fantastic text. Nefa Abu, he is really evoking his direct relationship with the goddess. He has misbehaved, he has transgressed, he has disobeyed the peak of the West, and he has been punished. And we see in the text two very different aspects of the goddess. She is described as being as fierce as a lion, and also as a gentle wind. And that is really one of the ways in which I envisage her. If we think about this walking in the Theban hills, as I was talking about before, in the quiet, and if we can imagine the feel of the wind, that would almost seem like the presence of the goddess. But if we just look at how she is depicted here, and it is in many respects similar to the representation that we saw of Hathor. We can see this wonderful multifaceted nature. She is serpentine in body, but she also has a human head with the double plumes. And if we think of this concept of her being like a gentle breeze, that the plumes would be wafting in the wind. And we also have a vulture headdress, a vulture head here that may be evocative of Mut, who of course is the consort of Ammon. And we can see here she is described as this mistress of the sky. The text is wonderful when we think about the ancients, how they believe that they have this strong and direct relationship with the goddess. I will speak to those great and small who are in the crew. Beware of the scarp. This is Elizabeth Froude's translation, and she describes the peak as the scarp, because a lion is within her. The scarp strikes with the blow of a savage lion. But then I found her coming to me as a sweet breeze. So in the text, we've got this dual nature of her as being very ferocious and also being very kind, just the same as we have this multifaceted representation of her here. And we have to think, of course, that the Theban hillside, this is where the workmen would have encountered snakes. Snakes and scorpions would be the most dangerous creatures your average person would encounter. So you worship things that you are fearful of, in the hope that they will not harm you. They would be particularly dangerous for children. A bite of a snake or a scorpion could be fatal for a child. Sorry, we have some of the most evocative representations of this concept of personal piety. This is a beautiful stele, and here we have the dedicatee who is on his knees. We can see the devotion that he is giving to MERETSEGER, and as she is enthroned, we have this wonderful disparity in height, which is clearly showing the reverence that she is being given. If we look closely at this, we can see that both the goddess and the dedicatee here have no eyes. It is possible that this isn't finished, but I don't think that is necessarily the reason why. We can see that paint has indeed been applied to this stele, which suggests that the lack of eyes is intentional. Is this blind devotion, or is this a reference to the text? Because we do have these concepts that MERETSEGER, if you disobey her, she will strike you down, she will cause an affliction. And is this what's happened here? Has he been blinded for his transgression? We have this concept of "you made me see darkness in the day." This actually is a term which appears in several Deir al-Medina stele of this time period. Galen has actually suggested that this is a metaphor for something else. He believes that this is the time period after the final judgment, but before you have reached the field of reeds. So almost like an ancient Egyptian purgatory. But it is possible that this is depicting the dedicatee who has been blinded for his transgression. Of course, to be blinded in ancient Egypt would be a dreadful affliction, but for the workmen who their sight would be essential for their livelihood, this would have seemed to be a dreadful occurrence. There are many stele which depict MERETSEGER. MERETSEGER is actually the goddess who is depicted on more stele from Deir al-Medina than any other deity, and that is really why she is such an important goddess, and that was really why I wanted to talk about her today. She is very much associated with the residents of Deir al-Medina. This is a fantastic stele. Paneb, and I'm sure many of you are familiar with, who is the rather famous and bad boy from ancient Egypt. He lived during the reign of Ramesses II and Seti. He actually becomes the chief workman during the reign of Seti, but he disappears from view in year 2 of Siptah. And this is because a whole series of allegations are made against him: bribery, theft, violent attacks, including sexual assault. But here he is, venerating a serpent deity. I wonder what MERETSEGER would have made of his transgressions. One of the unusual ways in which MERETSEGER is depicted is in a series of multiple representations. It is possible that this really refers to the concept of serpents and their ability to continually renew. If we think of the concept of the serpent shedding its skin, and then it is reborn, it is anew. It may also refer to the fact that the gods are seen to last forever, or indeed most of the gods. It's very rare that we have the concept of the death of a god. We do, of course, with Osiris, but for most of the gods we have this eternal aspect, and we can see that this multiple representations. It may also be evocative of the number of serpents that the Egyptians did indeed see in the Theban hillside. This is a particularly interesting stele. We have the dedicated he here, Wabet, yet the text names a man, which is very probably her husband. What I particularly like here is the similarity between the hieroglyphs and the pose that she is in here. We've got this giving praise to MERETSEGER, and that is indeed what Wabet is doing here. There are many stele which show these multiple representations of the serpent. And one of MERETSEGER's epithets is this mistress of generations and manifestations without number. So that indeed does suggest that this concept of the everlasting nature of the serpent. We do see this on, as I said, on many stele. I particularly like this example because we can think we have the single representation here, so we can think about this as perhaps representing the focus of the cult. We have the serpent on plinth. This might be representing a statue, as we saw before, and we have a Hess vase here, so a libation has been made. But then beneath it, we have this whole series of serpents, and this might represent her ability to continually renew. We do see men offering to MERETSEGER. It is not purely women who venerate the serpent deity. We can imagine here Nakt Min. We should really think about him as being in a posture of adoration before the goddess. In these stele, the gods tend to be in the upper register and the dedicatees in the bottom. Now, this is probably one of my very favourite representations of MERETSEGER. We can see in this tomb of Neferempet, we have this wonderful anthropomorphic image of the goddess, and bouncing on her knee is the tomb owner, and he is depicted as a child, and Briere suggests that he is born again as a child. We can see he has the side lock of youth, and he is depicted naked. And again, I think that's something we talked about last week, how the ancient Egyptians believe that you will be born naked and as a child. So MERETSEGER here is suckling the tomb owner, and we can see she is decked with beautiful rearing cobra earrings and a uraeus here. It was suggested to me that this image is very similar to representations of Nefertari, who does indeed wear very similar earrings in her tomb. It's interesting to think that Neferempet lived during the reign of Ramesses II. Perhaps he was even involved in creating Nefertari's tomb, or indeed the workmen who created this image, where we can see we have Ptah opposite Nefertari. Ptah, of course, was also particularly revered at the site as a god of craftsmen and as a creator deity. We do see MERETSEGER in the pantheon of gods, and this is really showing her importance. This is a door lintel, and we can see the tomb owner and his wife are making offerings, and here we have Osiris, and accompanying him we have MERETSEGER. Over here we have Isis, and we have Horus as Harpocrates. So we can see that MERETSEGER is being incorporated into the wider pantheon of gods at Deir el-Medina. Some of the most beautiful representations of the goddess are on ostraca, which were created as votive offerings. I think they are particularly telling in the sense that ostraca are shards of limestone. They're generally about the size of my hand, and they either come from the debris from the tombs that the workers are creating, or they come from the Theban hills, that they are just shards which have fallen off the mountainside. So they would make a particularly telling gift to the goddess if we think that she is epitomizing the Theban hills. And these are likely to have been created by the workmen for their own purposes. We have no indication that they created them for each other. That there is no suggestion that they were bartered, so to speak. So it is fascinating to think that we might indeed have a representation here of Penub, who is making an offering to MERETSEGER. How she is depicted is wonderful. We have the plinth here. We have her human-headed. She is in profile, but we have the hood, which is depicted frontally. She's even wearing a broad collar necklace, and we see the body really as if it is an aerial view. Behind here is this the mountainside that we are being shown here. As I said, I wonder whether the human representations make them more accessible. This is more scribal in origin, I would say, in the sense that we have just the black and the red used, the colours of the scribe, but we can see similarity again. The plinth, so she is being elevated. The profile view, the hood in frontal, and then the body in aerial. We tend, but not always, we tend to have the name of the dedicatee here because, of course, these are a gift to the goddess. MERETSEGER is the only serpent goddess who is named on these votive ostraca. There are a number of ostraca which show serpents, and the serpent isn't named. So it is possible that they are dedicated to Renrenut, but the only goddess, serpent goddess, who is named is MERETSEGER. This is a particularly fascinating example. We can see we have the reared hood, the sun disk, the cow horns, the offering table. But if we look here, is this an altar? Is this a lee-clo? In the first rooms of the houses of Deir al-Medina, a structure was found in many, not all. Briere called this a lee-clo, a closed bed, simply because it reminded him of box beds that he had seen in Brittany. They are really household altars. Is this representing one of the household altars? So we can imagine that MERETSEGER was perhaps worshipped in the home around the altar in the first room of the house. So I want to have a look at MERETSEGER, how she appears with other gods at Deir al-Medina, because again it really shows her importance. Just to bear in mind, of course, that creating a votive ostracon, this is much more accessible than having a limestone stele created. So this allows lower ranking members of the community to make an offering to the goddess. But if we look here, that this is a fantastic stele. We have MERETSEGER here, and behind her is the deified Amenhotep I. Amenhotep I and his mother Amrose Nefertari were deified and worshipped at Deir al-Medina. They're worshipped hundreds of years after they lived. Amenhotep I particularly, he is used in oracle processions. It's likely that his statue was paraded through the village every weekend. The worship of ancestors, both royal and non-royal, is the major form of religious practice at Deir al-Medina. So to associate MERETSEGER with Amenhotep I really shows her importance. And then here we have this wonderful representation of Amun-Ra, but it's Amun-Ra of the Opet. And the Opet association links to the temple at Luxor, which was created for the Opet Festival. The Opet Festival is very much a celebration of the royal car and also the divine Egyptian ruler. So this stele really links MERETSEGER with Amenhotep I, who is very much associated with the village, and Amen of the Opet, who is very much associated with the temple at Luxor. Now, by contrast, this unfinished stele, we see MERETSEGER here is in the company of Amen and Mut. Amen and Mut, of course, are in New Kingdom Egypt, are the most important state deities that they are worshipped, of course, at Karnak. This is an intriguing representation. Generally, the Egyptians like their gods to appear in triads, as that they believe that the gods would have children in the same way as they do. So are we having MERETSEGER being represented almost as a child of Amen and Mut here? It is a fascinating alliance. And we do see MERETSEGER with a number of female deities. This beautiful stele shows her in the company of Tawarit. Tawarit, of course, female deity, very much associated with the protection of women and children. There are at least 6 examples of objects which depict Tawarit at Deir el-Medina. But if we look here, once again, we can see we have the serpent determinative, and both MERETSEGER and Tawarit are wearing the sun disk and the cow horns. So we might think that they are associating themselves with Hathor. And this fantastic stele also really shows the Hathoric association. We have the beautiful Menet necklace here, which is very much a ritual instrument associated with Hathor. And here we can think about this really as almost evocative of the sistrum, which is also an instrument of Hathor. But if we look here, that this is where we would have the wires and the discs. Here we have this rearing cobra, and is this showing the link between MERETSEGER and Hathor? This stele really provides us with the strongest evidence of the link between Hathor and MERETSEGER. On the left here, we have a beautiful representation of MERETSEGER. And we have 14 serpents are traversing from MERETSEGER towards Hathor here, who is suckling a child. But the text is fascinating because Hathor is referred to as Mistress of the West, and her beautiful name of MERETSEGER, Mistress of the Libyan Mountains. So this suggests that MERETSEGER is one aspect of Hathor, while MERETSEGER herself is referred to as Mistress of the West, Mistress of the Sky, Mistress of the Gods. Yovet, in his study on MERETSEGER, he believed that there were 2 forms of MERETSEGER. One was the cosmic form of the goddess, when she takes on many of the roles of Hathor, and the other is the more local form of the goddess, where she is associated very much with the peak of the West. So we do see this at Deir al-Medina. We've seen the beautiful tomb scene of Neferenpet, where we have the deceased sitting as a child born again. So it is an interesting way for us to think about MERETSEGER, that she is one aspect of Hathor. So what I'd like to have a look at now are some representations of objects and images from Deir al-Medina, which might show MERETSEGER. These ostraca of ladies on beds, these were really how I came to first study the goddess. These ostraca, which show a lady sitting on a bed, they are very often fragmentary, so we need to almost use them as a jigsaw puzzle and look at a variety of them to try and understand what they probably depicted in their entirety. We often see a lady sitting on a bed while a companion brings an offering, very often of food and drink. Accompanying the lady on the bed is very often a child. So we can imagine that we have these wonderful representations of a woman sitting on a bed with a child while a friend or a family member is making an offering of food and drink to her. It has been suggested that this is very probably at celebrations in the home to mark the birth of a child. Now, many of these beds have a representation of a serpent. Some are more schematic than others. Here we can see we have the god Bes incorporated into the bed. He, of course, is a protector of women and children and the home. We can see the bed is decked with floral garlands. Is this a representation of a serpent? We can see it better on this example here. While studying the ostraca, I found 56 of the images of the ladies on the beds. And the serpent bed frame imagery was found on at least 22, because we have to remember these by their nature are fragmentary, but we do often see this serpent depicted on the bed. So is on these fantastic representations, it is MERETSEGER and Bes being evoked to protect women and children in the home. Bes legs, wooden Bes legs, have been found in the village, so it is very likely that these beds actually existed. So we can think that MERETSEGER was perhaps really called upon here to protect women and children in the home. This is a wall painting from one of the houses at Deir al-Medina. It is very fragmentary. We can see 4 pairs of feet and there would have been 2 papyri columns. Briere reconstructed it as this. We can see a nursing mother on a palm trunk while attendants make offerings. The interesting thing about this is that while Briere's reconstruction is unlikely to be correct now, it's much more likely that the nursing woman was a mortal, not a goddess, and she is wearing a heavy tripartite wig. But it is interesting that when Briere reconstructs this, he believes that the nursing woman is actually MERETSEGER. He initially thinks it might be Isis, and then because MERETSEGER is so represented at the site, he believes that this is MERETSEGER. As I said, scholarly opinion now would suggest that this is a mortal woman nursing a child. But it is the concept of the rebirth and the protection. This painting in the first room of the house, near a liclow, a household altar, this would have placed the children and the women in the household under the protection of a goddess. So if we're carrying on thinking about objects which might have representations of MERETSEGER, found at Deir el-Medina were hundreds of female figurines. They take a variety of forms. Some of them are standalone figurines, and some of them are ladies on beds. The ladies on beds are particularly interesting because the nature of the figurine means that the bed can really be used as a vehicle for imagery. Some of them depict children here, some of them show mirrors, and some of them have serpent imagery. We can just make out the imagery here. There is study actually going on at the moment about the figurines from Deir el-Medina. That there is new work being carried out by Marie-Lise Arnett for IFO, and she has suggested that there's actually over 1,000 figurines, female figurines, were found at Deir el-Medina, but there's about 160 of the ladies on beds. But if we just look, we can see these wonderful representations of the serpent imagery. Briere believed that these ladies on beds figurines, they were used in the area around the liclow, the household altar. He thought that they may have been offered either to gods or to ancestors. That they may have included a wish for birth in this life. A number of these are found in tombs. So the suggestion would be that they would also have a concept of rebirth in the next life. So the serpent, of course, would be very, very appropriate for this, as we've contemplated this regenerative aspect of the serpent. This is a wonderful example of a lady on a bed that has really very clear serpent imagery. Unfortunately, this has no provenance. It would be fantastic if it was from Deir el-Medina, but we can clearly see the importance of the serpent here. So if we can think about the significance of the serpent, we've contemplated its regenerative capacities. It is likely that the Egyptians link the serpent to this concept of rebirth and renewal. This is a wonderful Ostrakon, a jeu de nature, a play on words, a trick, a game. Paint is added really to emphasize the natural imagery, and we can see we've got legs here. The ability for movement is something that is particularly important in the Book of the Dead, the concept of coming forth by day. But these ostraca, it is very possible that these are held, they are very tactile. You might hold this, you might say something, you might do something. This might have been used in what we think of as magical or medical rituals. We do have clear references to the importance of the snake in the Book of the Dead, which really shows us its concept of renewal. The Book of the Dead, of course, is a series of recitations taken into the afterlife to aid your rebirth. Most books of the dead, because none are identical, most contain what we describe as transformation spells. And these spells allow the deceased to transform into a divine being or a wild creature. And one of those spells allows you to transform into a snake. I am the setter snake, long of years, who sleeps and is reborn each day. I am the setter snake, dwelling in the limits of the earth. I sleep and I am reborn, renewed and rejuvenated each day. And again, we've got the beautiful representation with the legs. At Deir al-Medina, in an anonymous tomb, in the sense that the name hasn't survived, there is a wonderful image showing the life-giving qualities of the serpent. We can just make this out. This is the ceiling, so we can think of this really as the upper border. And we can see in between the coils of the serpent, we have the ankh, a symbol of life. And then here we have a shen, which of course is a symbol of eternity. Similar imagery appears in the tomb of Nefertari. There we do have some text which describes it as "it gives life," and the it is a female. So we can think of the life-giving essence of a female serpent. So I wanted to end by looking at some representations of Renrenut. As MERETSEGER is not the only goddess who is depicted at the site. This is a beautiful stele here. But what we have to remember, and what is really the strong difference between Renrenut and MERETSEGER is that Renrenut is a goddess who is worshipped nationwide. She is attested as early as the pyramid text. There are limited representations, limited texts, recitations to her, but she does appear. So that is as early as the 5th dynasty. And she is seen really as a protector of the king. Her name means she of nurture. At Deir al-Medina, Renrenut does appear on a number of shrines. These are small household shrines. Many of these are found in the kitchen area, and they are blackened by smoke. Not that many have survived. This is probably one of the better represented. Sadly, this door jamb is in Turin. If only they could be married together. But we have the dedicatee who is making an offering to Renrenut and to Sobek. Renrenut is associated very much with grain, and at Deir al-Medina she is referred to as the lady of the granary. We do see MERETSEGER also depicted on these shrines, but we also here see Renrenut, and it is very possible that the veneration of serpents in the kitchen area is really as a protector of grain. At Deir el-Medina, one of the earliest, if not the earliest, dream manuals has been found, where 226 dreams are interpreted. That they are interpreted quite simply as good or bad. They all start with, if a man sees himself in a dream, and one of them it describes if a man sees himself seeing a serpent. This is good because it means food. So it is quite possible that serpents were seen really as protectors of grain because of their pest control. They would, of course, have hunted rodents. So this might have been their association with grain. So, as I said, Renrenut is very much a nationwide goddess, and this this beautiful stele here, this is actually dedicated by Setu, who is a particularly important official in the reign of Ramesses II. He is the viceroy of Kush. So clearly, the provision of grain is seen as something that the king is responsible for, and it would, of course, be seen as a mark of his ability as a ruler if he could not provide grain for his people. But the titles that Renrenut takes, the titles that Renrenut takes are very much associated with food and with nurturing. I said that there is no ostraca from Deir el-Medina which names Renrenut. This ostracon in the Ashmolean, this was bought by Gardner in Luxor, so we can't be certain of its provenance. But this does indeed depict Renrenut, and we can see she is suckling a child. Gardner believed that this was Nepre, who is a god of grain and was seen to be Osiris in his child form. So Renrenut does appear at Deir el-Medina, but in nowhere near the significant numbers that we see MERETSEGER. And we do not have the beautiful hymns, that this concept of this personal piety, this close and this really very palpable bond that the ancient Egyptians seem to have felt to MERETSEGER. So we will stop there.
Thank you so much, Jo. That was wonderful. Again, so interesting. I was just wondering whether we've had Kasia Zapakowska talk about the sort of serpent elements in dreams previously. And one of the things I've read in dream interpretation texts is that for some reason snakes were associated with words, like either hearing good or bad words, which I find quite interesting. But also I was wondering if there's any mention of MERETSEGER on any of these uraeus that were used as a sort of defense against nightmares. You know, these little clay rearing uraeus that people put in the corners of the room where they were sleeping to protect them during the night.
Yes, I know the ones you mean. Cassie has been researching them, hasn't she, for many years, and has found hundreds of them. What is actually very interesting is that Cassia describes them as demon fighting uraei. And when we look at where they are found, none are found in Thebes or Deir el-Medina. And that very well might be because MERETSEGER is worshipped there. I didn't want to, I knew Cassia had been on and I wasn't sure what she had talked about. But if we just let me
One
go.
of the other things she says about those cobras is that they were taken on military campaigns.
Yeah. If we just look, I didn't want to be stealing Cassia's thunder because it is her research. But if we look at this map, this is where they are found. And it's fascinating. We don't find them here. And I think that is because MERETSEGER is worshipped in serpent form.
But could that be also that, I mean, if you look at where they kind of start outside of Thebes, and I wonder because they were taken on military campaigns. I think that was Cassia's idea about it. So they may have moved or been made en route potentially.
Yeah, because there are varying levels of skill. Some of them are quite artistically made, and others are much more rudimentary. It's very interesting that there is quite a significant number found at Amarna as well. But yeah, if you're going to be outside the borders of Egypt, you might have felt that you needed the protection of the Cobra goddess.
I guess as well, if you say that the Cobra goddess is personified or is the personification of that mountain, it may have been a way of keeping a sort of snapshot of home potentially on that protection of that area that you associate with home with you, maybe. I don't know.
Well, it would depend, wouldn't it? Where not every person on these military expeditions is going to have come from Thebes.
No.
But it's just the serpent is so important. And when we looked at, like, Isis takes a serpent determinative, we saw Tawaret with a serpent determinative. When we have Selkat, Neith, Isis and Nephthys in the funerary realm protecting the sarcophagus and the canopic chests, they're often referred to as the Uraei goddesses. So you don't have to be serpentine in form to use that because of that protective capacity. So I think that the serpent is a motif that other deities, that's why we looked at the multifaceted nature of the god, and how I think of it, as I said, as this tub of marbles that you can pour into different vessels, but the essence of it stays the same. It just takes a different form. But the rearing cobra is clearly a very important representation. I mean, it's too simplistic, but we have to remember that the Egyptians, every night Apophis attacks Ra.
Yeah. So
we have the male aspect of the serpent. It's too simplistic to think male bad, female good. Yeah. But we do have this concept of Apophis, who every night attacks the sun god. And the reason Apophis is so dangerous is due to this concept of rebirth, that he can regenerate every night and attack again, because that's the nature of the serpent.
Can I just ask a question, Joanne?
Yes,
you mentioned there was a study done of MERETSEGER in which there was two aspects: the cosmic kind of aspect and the one that's more local to the mountain. What's the name of that study, and who's the author?
It's, let me write, it's his name is Jovet. Is
it in English?
No, it's in French.
Oh, well.
The much of the Deir al-Medina material is in French. Just let me make sure I've got the spelling of his name, because not everybody, we are very lazy and selfish, us English speakers. It's a chapter, it's a paper he's written in a text which is on Deir al-Medina. I think it was a conference that was at either IFO or at the Louvre, but most of the papers are in French.
And what was his name?
Yovet. I've put it in the chat.
Oh, I beg your pardon. Thanks. Okay, I'll take a look. Thanks.
But yes, and I thought his way of thinking about MERETSEGER was quite helpful, to think about the fact that she is associated with the Loki. We only see her at Deir al-Medina and at Thebes, but she takes on these cosmic roles, and perhaps that makes her more accessible, perhaps that makes her. Perhaps that makes Hathor, Mistress of the West, more accessible to the workmen, because they live in such a unique village. If we think that you can see your ancestors' tombs, you can see the El Kern, your whole environment is very evocative of the divine.
Can I I'll ask one more question? Presumably then snakes, real snakes that would turn up wouldn't be harmed in any way, because they're presumed as symbols of a goddess. So even though they were poisonous, presumably snakes, nobody would actually harm them, do you think?
I don't have any, I haven't heard any evidence of snakes being killed or captured. There is evidence of snake charmers, that there is somebody at Deir al-Medina has an official role as a snake and a scorpion charmer, and if we think it's later in the time period, and it's not Deir al-Medina, but if you think of the small stele, we call them the Horus Kippus, where we see Horus, the child, and he's standing on crocodiles, and he generally holds in his hands snakes and scorpions, and that is because the idea is you pour water over it, and then the water will act as a preventative and a cure to bites of snakes and scorpions. So we have evidence of the Egyptians trying to counteract the bites of snakes and scorpions, but I haven't come across any evidence of them actively trying to kill them.
Excellent. Does anyone else have any other questions for Jo? Feel free to unmute your microphones if you want to ask a question.
Yeah, could I ask a question? There was a stela that you showed from, I believe, the Louvre. It was, I think it had 18 MERETSEGER, or presumably MERETSEGER snakes on it, but you didn't have a number. Just wonder if you knew.
I think that's my own photograph. I think it's quite. I think I know the one you mean.
That's one. That one.
The next one. I think it's that one, isn't it?
Yeah.
No, I'll have a look for you and see whether I've done what I should have done, which is take a photograph and then photograph the label, or whether I've made a schoolgirl error and not photographed the label.
Thanks.
I'll have a little look and I'll message you.
Thank you. We've all done that. We've all taken photographs and missed the
labels. Yeah. And then you think, oh, why did I do that? Yeah.
We have to go back.
Oh yes, obviously, yes, definitely.
Any other questions at all?
Is Meret an old goddess, or did she appear when work at Deir al-Medina began? She only really appears at Deir al-Medina. That there's no reference to MERETSEGER. Well, none that I've come across at any other time period. But to be fair, as I said, my interest in her began when I was researching the ostraca, which were found at Deir al-Medina. So that was when I sort of jumped in. But there may have been a serpent cult at Deir al-Bari earlier, but whether that that is to MERETSEGER or not is of course is another issue. But the evidence we have is tied very firmly to Deir al-Medina and predominantly the 19th dynasty.
I wonder if there's any evidence of Egyptians observing estivation in snakes, because cave sites are especially sort of popular places for snakes to estivate in very hot weather. So that would look like loads of snakes were dead, but then they would come back to life. So perhaps the mountain itself was a good kind of base for that kind of activity.
Yeah, definitely. And your vet in his study, he found that at Deir al-Bahari there was lots of graffiti to Hathor, but there was also some to MERETSEGER, but not as much. And that was another one of the things that he believed that MERETSEGER was in essence, this local form of Hathor.
Hi, I've just looked through my book of gods and goddesses, and it seems that MERETSEGER, you were right, Jo, is definitely just tied to the Theban hillside and the workers at Deir al-Medina. So you're right.
Thank you. I mean, I do find her fascinating, and I think it is really that concept, that the name "She Who Loves Silence," and as I said, any of us that have walked in those Theban hills, you notice the difference even today. And so what it must have been like in the ancient time, and that concept of her being like a sweet breeze, it is that direct sort of link that the ancient Egyptians felt with her that is wonderful. And the hymns on the stele are just fantastic example of that personal piety from that time period.
So is she actually then completely associated with that hill, is El Kern?
Well,
because it's a strange shaped hill, isn't it? It's very striking because it does look very pyramidal.
It does look very pyramidal, and that might be very well why. I mean, let's not forget, we've got Montuhotep II who builds his temple there first, and then Hathor comes, and then Hatshepsut comes and builds her temple. But it's highly likely that the pyramidal shape is part of its appeal. It's likely, Peter, that she really is associated with the whole West Bank. If we think of the whole Theban hillside, so don't think of her just a El Kern. I think of her really as the whole hillside. And that's why the concept of the ostraca is fascinating. Imagine if you pick up this shard that's just come away from the hillside. The hillside, MERETSEGER is epitomizing the hillside, and then you use that shard to make a votive to her. There are so many aspects that I find fascinating in this. That is much more accessible. You don't need to have a limestone stele cut and painted. You can just do that yourself. Right, thank you.
Jo, are you saying she's a household god, a bit like Bess?
Well, the images of the images on the ostraca of the beds and we've got the ladies. We've got the ladies sitting on the beds nursing the children. We obviously don't know what that serpent represents. The beds don't. The ostraca with the ladies on the beds don't have any text. But given that the ladies on beds ostraca are only found at Deir al-Medina, and MERETSEGER is the principal deity, the principal serpent deity at the site, I think it's MERETSEGER that is depicted on the beds, much more than Renrennet. And the votive ostraca, we only have MERETSEGER named. We don't have any other serpent deity named. So that would suggest that she is evoked in the home in a protective capacity. Yeah. And the ladies on beds figurines, and again, a number of those have serpent representations on them. Those figurines
relate also to the fertility aspects, because cobras lay eggs, and they lay quite large numbers of eggs as well. So I wonder if there's a sense of trying to evoke that power to have lots of babies.
Yeah, that very well might be. Yeah.
Are there any representations of eggs that you know of? Because I think cobras can they can just reproduce on their own as well, female cobras. They don't need a male cobra to reproduce, apparently. I wonder whether Egyptians could detect that.
There's no egg related imagery in the Deir al-Medina material, no. Of course, in the Egyptian theology, the egg obviously has a role in creation myths, but no, that's very interesting. I hadn't thought about that. And the egg, that would be very telling on the figurines, particularly, which it's likely that they were offered in the home, and some of them are then taken into the tomb. So you'd have that link between birth and rebirth.
I wonder if, because a lot of them are dotted along their bodies as well, and I wonder if that is supposed to represent the eggs, perhaps, because cobras don't tend to have that patterning, do they?
Yeah. Yeah.
Any other questions?
Right then. Well, folks.
That was marvellous, Jo. Thank you so much, and thank you to everyone for coming along. It will take me a while to process this video now, because it takes a long time for me to upload it, but I'll probably send it out tomorrow, so you can watch it again at your leisure, or if you didn't catch it this time around, you can watch it.
I can't bear to watch myself. I've never watched any of me.
I should do like a highlight reel then, just for you, Jo.
No, I'd probably never do a Zoom talk again if I watched myself. So no, I don't think that's a good thing.
That was fantastic. Thank you.
Well, thank you for letting me talk about MERETSEGER, which is one of my favourite deities.
Thank you.
Yeah.
My pleasure. Thank you so much. That was excellent.
Right then, folks. Enjoy your Saturday evening. Bye bye.
See you soon.
Bye.
Bye, Jo. See you soon.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.